A desperate search for a missing Valley woman has turned into a murder investigation.
Glendale police have arrested a man who they say met a woman online, social media, went on a date with her, and then murdered her, burying her body near Lake Pleasant. Fox 10's Megan Spector joins us now with new details.
Detectives used everything from cell phone data to surveillance video to track down this suspect, 24-year-old Domonic Rodolico. But as the investigation continues, those who knew the victim, 21-year-old Arianna Jones, are remembering the friend they lost.
On Sunday, July 5th, a young woman went out to meet a man she'd been talking to online, expecting an ordinary night, a movie, a ride home, and a check-in call with the little boy she called every day. But she never made it back. As the hours passed, her family couldn't reach her, and the calls she made every day just stopped. By the second day, they'd stopped waiting for an explanation and started searching for her instead. Detectives learned she'd gone to a movie with someone that night, and surveillance cameras placed the two of them together, but once they left the theater, the trail led away from the city and out toward a remote stretch of desert near Lake Pleasant. When investigators looked at his movements earlier that same day, they found something harder to explain. His phone had allegedly been near that same stretch of desert before he ever picked her up. Days later, search teams found a shallow grave there, along with objects that tied the burial site back to the movie theater. And when detectives finally questioned the man who'd taken her out that night, he told them a very different story, that two strangers had attacked them, that he'd escaped, and that she'd been left behind. But as detectives followed the evidence, that story began to change. So what happened after a young mother went out for what was supposed to be a first date at the movies? Before we go any further, this is 10K Crimes. Subscribe and stay with us as we follow the missed calls, the movie date, the digital trail into the desert, and the evidence that turned a missing person search into a murder investigation. Her name was Arianna Bailey Jones, a 21-year-old mother of a 2-year-old boy. At the time, her son was staying with her mother, Sophia Sardinas, and even while they were apart, Arianna checked in through video calls all the time, so Sophia knew exactly how often her daughter wanted to see him. That Sunday, he was still with Sophia, but after Arianna went out that evening, the routine broke. The video calls stopped, messages went unanswered, and Sunday turned into Monday, then Monday into another day with no word from her. For Sophia, the silence didn't add up. Arianna loved her son, and disappearing without even checking if Sophia could keep him longer just wasn't like her. So by Tuesday, July 7th, with 2 days gone and still no word, concern turned into something more serious, and the family reported Arianna missing and started searching on their own. One of the first places they went was her apartment, and what they found there made it clear she hadn't just changed her plans. Arianna wasn't there, but her dog was, shut in without food or water long enough to be sitting in its own waste. For the family, that alone ruled out any idea that she'd just decided to stay somewhere else for a few days. Then they found damage around her front door, and it was clear something was wrong. That's when a friend gave police the first clear lead beyond Arianna's home. Before she disappeared, it turned out she'd planned to meet someone for a movie. Until then, the family had been searching blind, with no idea where she'd gone or who she was with. But now investigators finally had a night to reconstruct and a name to find. Before long, cameras helped fill in part of that missing time. Arianna had made it to the movie theater, and she hadn't gone there alone. The man with her that night was Domonic Rodolico, a 24-year-old she'd been communicating with through social media, and police later said the two appeared to be meeting in person for the first time. Rodolico picked Arianna up that Sunday evening, and the two went to a Harkins movie theater in North Phoenix, where the theater offered detectives something Arianna's apartment couldn't, a visual record. Surveillance placed them together, and around 11:30 that night, cameras caught them leaving, with Rodolico carrying a white Harkins souvenir cup. At the time, it looked like nothing, just a cup from a night out. But once they left the theater, cameras couldn't follow them any further, so investigators turned to cell phone records, traffic camera footage, and other digital tracking. That evidence traced the two of them away from the theater and toward Northwest Phoenix, where their phones were reportedly near Rodolico's home for roughly half an hour before the trail moved again, this time away from the city and toward the desert near Lake Pleasant. Still, what detectives found when they looked further back into Rodolico's movements made that drive far more significant. After leaving the area near Rodolico's home, the digital trail continued north toward Lake Pleasant Parkway and West Old Carefree Highway, a world away from the theater Arianna had left only hours before. Their phones were reportedly in that remote spot for roughly 50 minutes, and that alone gave detectives somewhere important to look. But when they examined Rodolico's movements from earlier that Sunday, the same location appeared again, because before he ever picked Arianna up for the movie, his phone had allegedly already traveled to that stretch of desert. So this wasn't somewhere he'd gone only after the date. The location data suggested Rodolico had been out there earlier, left, picked Arianna up, taken her to the movies, and then headed back toward the same place. The data couldn't show what happened once the phones reached the desert, and it couldn't explain why he'd allegedly gone there beforehand, but it gave the search a destination. So as Arianna's disappearance entered its 5th day, investigators moved away from her apartment and the movie theater and into the desert north of Phoenix, and this time they brought cadaver dogs. By Saturday, July 11th, Arianna had been missing nearly a week, and Sophia had spent those days searching, handing out flyers, holding on to the hope her daughter would still come home. Now, as investigators worked through the remote area identified by the digital trail, one of the cadaver dogs alerted searchers to a particular spot, and there they discovered a shallow grave. Inside were human remains. Police said clothing and other physical evidence at the scene were enough to identify them as Arianna, while medical examiner testing continued. For her family, the search had reached the outcome they'd feared. For detectives, the desert was now a crime scene. Around the burial site, investigators recovered items that could help reconstruct what happened after the movie: latex gloves, clothing, and materials associated with concrete. But 2 objects stood out because we already know where they came from. They were Harkin's souvenir cups, the same kind Rodolico had been carrying when he and Arianna walked out of the theater. So a small detail from the beginning of the night had followed the investigation all the way into the desert. The cups created a physical connection between the theater and the place where the search ended, and police also reported finding materials involving concrete and lye near the burial site. Together with the cell phone trail, that gave investigators plenty to examine as they turned their attention back to the last man seen with Arianna. By then, detectives had followed Rodolico's movements before the date, watched the theater surveillance, traced the journey afterward, and searched the remote area where the digital trail led them. So on July 11th, they located him, reportedly cleaning the rear area of his vehicle. Detectives also noticed injuries to his hand, injuries that had been visible earlier. Rodolico's mother told investigators she'd seen 3 large cuts on his right hand the morning after Arianna disappeared, and he'd already given her an explanation. He said 2 unknown men had attacked him, but according to the story he told, Arianna had been there too.
And she didn't deserve to be put in a grave like that. She just thought she was going on a date.
Sophia Sardina is struggling to comprehend that her daughter, Arianna Jones, isn't coming home.
She's always been a feisty, I call her a firecracker. She had her own little spunky attitude.
The 21-year-old was a mother herself to a 2-year-old little boy. That's part of the reason why Sardinas quickly figured out something wasn't right.
She loved her son so much, and that's how I knew that something was wrong. She would never just leave and not make sure I was okay with keeping him a little bit longer.
Jones was reported missing by family on July 7th, 2 days after court records say she had a date with a man she met on Snapchat. Police now allege that man, Domonic Rodolico, killed her and buried her body in a remote desert area near Lake Pleasant Parkway and Old Carefree Highway.
Detectives, I can tell you, did find a shallow grave in that area, and they found a body in that grave.
The body discovered last weekend was too decomposed to identify without further tests. but a tattoo leads police to believe the person found is Jones.
I don't know why this man came into my daughter's life. I don't know how she came across him and why it had to be her.
Police say cell phone data puts Rodolico in the area of the gravesite 3 times in less than 24 hours, including before the date with Jones.
She was better than me. She was better than me. My baby deserved to be a mom, deserved to have a family.
Jones' family left wondering why. For now, loved ones want people to remember Jones by her smile.
Her smile and her beautiful eyes, by the way she cared for her son.
Anytime you saw me, you saw Ari. Anytime you saw Ari, you asked about where I was at. Like, we were inseparable, I could say.
Over the phone, a close friend of Arianna Jones speaks to her memory.
She made everybody smile. She was very kind-hearted. She did her best to be around everyone she loved. She was going through a hard time herself, and yet she never put anybody behind her, never failed to check in or let people know, like, she was there.
There was enough evidence, physical evidence of not only clothing, but other things matching Miss Jones to be able to identify her.
Digital evidence, vehicle tracking, and surveillance footage quickly led detectives to Domonic Rodolico, who was already on felony probation in connection to a burglary.
All right, sir, can you state your name and date of birth, please?
Domonic Rodolico, June 18th, 2002.
Police say they met after connecting online. Rodolico denies being involved in her death.
He is saying that the two of them were in this remote area and that 2 individuals showed up and attacked them.
But police say the physical evidence contradicts his story.
Sufficient enough evidence to link them together. There was sufficient enough evidence to show Mr. Rodolico was in that area several times before they actually were in the area.
Investigators tracked the pair to a movie theater before they drove to Lake Pleasant. According to court documents, detectives found 2 Harkins souvenir cups where she was buried.
Have this surveillance video show where they were at.
When detectives questioned Rodolico, he gave them a similar account. He allegedly said that after the movie, he and Arianna went to another location where 2 unknown men approached and attacked them, that he was injured, Arianna was attacked too, and he managed to escape while she was left behind. He even told detectives he believed she was probably no longer alive, yet he'd never contacted police to report the alleged attack or to tell anyone Arianna had been left in danger. Then, as questioning continued, police said his version began to change. And by that point, detectives had far more than his explanation to consider. They had theater surveillance placing Arianna with him, the digital trail into the desert, evidence that his phone had allegedly visited that same area before the date, the shallow grave and the Harkins cups found nearby, and now a man they'd located reportedly cleaning the rear of his own vehicle. So an investigation that had started with a mother who simply stopped answering her family had led detectives, 6 days later, back to the man last seen leaving the theater with her. Police arrested Domonic Rodolico on July 11th, but for Arianna's family, the arrest came only after the question they'd been asking all week had already been answered. For 6 days, Arianna had been a missing person photograph on flyers and social media, but to the people searching for her, she was much more than that. She was a 21-year-old mother whose 2-year-old son was woven into everything she did, and even while he stayed with Sophia, she stayed present, calling every day just to see his face. That was why the silence frightened her family so quickly, and it's also why Sophia wanted people to remember who her daughter had been before her name became part of a homicide investigation. Arianna loved her son and wanted to build a family of her own. She'd talked about becoming a stylist and creating a future for herself, and a close friend remembered her as kind-hearted, someone who could make people smile and who still checked on others even while dealing with struggles of her own. She and Sophia had also spent years apart after Arianna was adopted as a young child, but they'd eventually found their way back to each other when she was older, so they'd already lost time once, and now Sophia had spent nearly a week searching for another reunion that would never come. By the end of that week, her family understood what the silence meant. Her son had lost his mother, and Sophia had lost the daughter she'd been trying to bring home. Domonic Rodolico was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and abandonment or concealment of a dead body in connection with Arianna's death. The case remains pending, but for Arianna's family, the arrest and charges came only after their own search had already ended in the desert. Sophia had spent days hoping each new lead would bring her daughter home. Instead, the investigation had reconstructed a movie date, a digital trail, and a remote burial site, and none of that could give the family back what they'd lost. For Arianna's family, the story had started with something small enough to notice only because they knew her so well. She stopped calling. Arianna had gone out that Sunday evening for what was supposed to be simple: a movie, a ride home, and a call to check on her little boy before bed. But instead, her family spent the next 6 days piecing together a trail she could no longer explain. That trail moved from her apartment to a movie theater, then through cell phone data into the desert north of Phoenix, and along the way, ordinary details took on a different meaning: a souvenir cup, a drive after the movie, a phone moving through the night. But Arianna Bailey Jones was more than the final movements detectives reconstructed. She was a daughter, a friend, and a mother whose little boy had been expecting her back. The stopped calls began as a warning, and now they mark an absence her family will carry long after the investigation ends. Her son will grow up without his mother, and Sophia will live with the loss of the daughter she spent days trying to bring home. If you believe cases like Arianna's deserve careful, complete coverage that remembers the person behind the investigation, subscribe to 10K Crimes, leave your thoughts respectfully in the comments, and share her story with someone who should hear it.